Tenants in Florida say that their landlord evicted them after their apartments were destroyed by the hurricane. But is it legal for landlords to do so? I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the topic of what happens when a natural disaster hits your property, okay, and your tenants are displaced because of it. Now, obviously, the rules are going to be different from state to state. And this article I'm going to be going over today is specific to Florida. So you'll have to look into your own state's or your jurisdiction's landlord-tenant laws to know for sure what laws and rules you have to apply by, right? Or comply with, I'm sorry. But the main thing here is, though, what do you think the landlord should have to cover? And do the tenants have any responsibility on their own to look for new housing when their units are destroyed? So, I mean, it's really an interesting topic. I'm not going to say that, hey, in this situation that the tenants are at fault, like I normally would, right? But remember, the landlord isn't at fault either. They're the ones who are dealing with catastrophic damage to their properties. And there might not be anything they can do other than tell the people, hey, you got to find somewhere else to live, okay? So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think, okay? What do you think should apply when something catastrophic like a hurricane or a tornado or other natural disaster destroys the units, right? And they're no longer livable. Okay, do you think the landlord should be allowed to evict the tenant at that point? Or do you believe that, hey, the landlord has some sort of responsibility to that tenant and the tenant should be allowed to come back after the repairs are done? Okay, I mean, this is a big question. This is a big problem, especially in a place like Florida or pretty much anywhere in this country where the housing supply is so limited that a lot of tenants are going to have a lot of difficulty finding somewhere else to live after a natural disaster, especially. So anyway, let's get into this article. So this article is coming from mynews13.com, and it says, tenants of flooded apartments facing eviction. And there's a little video with this article. I'll play that for you right now.
Things started floating, and everything was up to here. Up to here, as you see the mark on the patio, that's the mark of the water, and it came inside the apartment. As you see the mark on the wall is also on the wall. It destroyed everything that I've owned. The little bit I get monthly, it got destroyed. Which is nothing really, but what counts is that I'm alive. Thank you, Jesus. I'm happy that I'm alive. But then what now? We need help where to live. A lot of people lost their food, including myself. We need help with a lot of stuff. If anybody out there can help us, it'd be appreciated. I don't know what else to say. It's just that we lost everything.
All right, you saw the video. Let's get into this article. While many in Central Florida are worried about getting their homes repaired after Hurricane Ian, some in Orange County are worried about getting evicted. It is something dozens of families in the Pine Castle community are dealing with, and it may not be legal. This is Judith Montadioca's new reality. Despite battling cancer and COPD, she didn't need oxygen full-time until after Hurricane Ian. Now, I have to be all day with it because of the smell, the humidity. It is difficult for me to breathe, said Montadioca. Her first-floor apartment at Cypress Landing Apartments in Pine Castle was one of many that flooded during the storm. Montadioca woke up in the middle of the night to take medicine to find the water so high that her oxygen tanks were floating. They were just floating in the room, she said, but she had no idea this was only the beginning of her nightmare. It is hurting me. I can't breathe, said Montadioca. It is hard for me to sleep, and these people want to take us out. We don't have no place to go. Montadioca claims days later her landlords announced in a community meeting that tenants with flood damage would need to move by the end of the month. Montadioca is still in shock, sharing they can't find another affordable option. Yeah, this is a bad bad situation, right? And I'm going to talk about my personal experience with flood damage. So I own some duplexes in Independence, Missouri, right? And there was a pretty hard rainstorm back a little over a year ago, right? Actually, it might have been 2 years ago. No, it was back in 2021, spring of 2021. I experienced some flood damage in the basement and garage areas, right? So I had to get flood remediation to come in there and clean those places out and make them so that my tenants, they didn't have everything soaking wet and destroyed in the bottom levels of their homes, right? So that obviously is very expensive. And guess what? I paid for it out of pocket. Did not make an insurance claim. So I know how much these sort of things cost. And I only had 4 units at the time that had damage. So, imagine an apartment complex where you've got dozens of units with this sort of damage in it. And at the same time, natural disaster has occurred. Well, guess what? You've got hundreds or thousands of properties all near you, all needing flood damage repair, etc. So the people who are doing this sort of work, they might not be able to get out and get the repairs done as quickly as you would think necessary. Plus, the place might not be livable for the entire building, due to maybe perhaps electrical damage or, other damage. They're going to actually be structural damage to the foundation. I'm sure that these are sitting on a slab, but there can be structural damage from this sort of flooding as well, right? And so it might make the entire building unsafe. And you might have to say, hey, nobody can live here until I get all of the repairs done. Otherwise, you're going to be staying in an unsafe building. It's a very common occurrence. Now, I don't want to evict these good, hard, good paying tenants, right? But if it takes me, 2-3 months to be able to get all of these repairs done and then get my building back in place, especially when you're dealing with insurance companies, they can pay off kind of slow at times, okay? So imagine you're sitting there, and what's your responsibility as a landlord? Are you supposed to be paying for this person to stay in a hotel that whole time? I don't think so personally, but I do know that renters should have some sort of renter's insurance just for this sort of situation. And the other unfortunate thing is, like I said before, there aren't enough available housing units for all of the people who are displaced. And that's going to make it very difficult for renters to find a new place to rent, especially for the cost that they were paying before. Now, I'm not encouraging landlords to start price gouging in the middle of this natural disaster. I'm not going to say that. But the only properties available might be the ones that were already more expensive than the ones they were currently living in. This is a bad thing, okay? This isn't good for the landlords. This isn't good for the tenants. This isn't good for anybody. The insurance companies, they're taking a beating. I don't know who this is good for other than the repairmen, okay? If you're one of those people who does, flood damage or repairs roofs or all that, you're doing great right now. But everybody else, we're suffering, okay? And I normally I'd be like, oh, well, the tenant's just out of luck. They're screwed or whatever, right? But in this situation, I certainly hope that they have some sort of insurance coverage to cover their damages to all of their lost property, and to help them at least be able to stay somewhere in a hotel or something until they're able to find somewhere else to live, because that's a horrible position to be put in. My husband was looking, and he says a year in a waiting list. Where are we going to go? She said. Orange County Commissioner Mayra Uribe believes this is unacceptable and is trying to do anything she can to help. This just exaggerated what we know is already happening in Orange County. So now it is even worse because we have folks who had somewhere to live, who are in a lease and who are paying, and we were talking about 200 families. There is nowhere that I know they can go, said Uribe. Nowhere to go because of the lack of affordable housing in Central Florida. Ian putting a bigger pinch on the housing market. Now, on top of her health issues and sharing the couch with her granddaughter for a dry place to sleep at night, she's worried about what the next month holds. I can't go to the street, said Montedioca tearfully. Even with most of their belongings now soggy and piled up outside the front door, she plans to stay in her home until they kick her out. That is unfortunate, okay? I mean, but like I said, what is the solution? Like the landlord can't allow you to stay while these sort of repairs are going on. There might not be power. There might not be running water. The building itself might be structurally unsound and fall down on top of you. Our liability, is high if we let you stay in there. And so we just can't allow that to happen. We have to get you out while the repairs are being done. Now, after the repairs are complete, maybe you can come back, okay? But that that would be the best option right there, to say, hey, we're going to give you the first right of return after all of the repairs are complete. But I mean, what more can a landlord do? And I don't know what the Florida law says, but I think the article actually goes into that. And let me skip down to that part right now. So, according to Community Legal Services of Mid-Florida, under Florida law, a landlord cannot end a lease to make repairs like this. If the tenant needs to be relocated while necessary repairs happen, the rent needs to be abated or reduced for that portion of time while the tenant is gone. The landlord cannot charge rent for the period of time the tenant is out due to these repairs, but the landlord is not required to cover the tenant's costs for hotel stays, other accommodations, etc. Okay, so that's quite interesting right there. The landlord is not responsible for covering the cost of hotel stays, but the landlord's not going to charge you rent while the repairs are being done. That seems fair, okay? I know that this is a bad, pretty much unprecedented situation where this sort of thing happens. But remember, it's not like the landlord is doing this out of some kind of greed or animus towards the tenant. They're doing this because they have to do it. Okay, they have to make these repairs in order to bring the property back online. There is the casualty damage provision of Florida landlord tenant law, which says, if the premises are damaged or destroyed other than by the wrongful or negligent acts of the tenant, so that the enjoyment of the premises is substantially impaired, the tenant may terminate the rental agreement and immediately vacate the premises. However, this applies for the tenant, not the landlord. So, the law says that if the property is badly damaged and it wasn't the tenant's fault, right, then the tenant can basically terminate the lease agreement at that point. Okay, and so for like in a hurricane, the tenant can say, okay, well, I'm done, the lease is over. But the landlord can't just say, okay, the lease is over, you're done because of a hurricane coming in. So it's kind of an interesting way this law is written. And, like I said, the Florida law does not apply throughout the entire country. You'll have to look at your own local landlord tenant laws in order to figure out what exactly you would have to do in a situation like this. And these sort of situations, they do happen all over the country, okay? I mean, they were talking about there were huge wildfires in California, a couple years ago. There's earthquakes that occur. There are tornadoes in where I live, and floods, they also happen where I live. There's, all sorts of things that can cause this sort of catastrophe to happen to you, and you need to know, one, what exactly the law says you need to be doing, and two, you need to make sure that you're properly insured to cover you in case something like this does happen.